Earlier in the offseason, Brian Kelly shared that Harold Perkins would be moving back to inside linebacker, which was a decision that I vehemently disagreed with. But after hearing defensive coordinator Blake Baker's plan, not just about where Harold Perkins is going to play, but how he's going to be used, I think I can be getting on board.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. That's also on YouTube as well. So you can watch the podcast in addition to listening on your preferred podcast platform and on YouTube. So like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all of that great stuff. Just appreciate you for always making us your first listen every single day. We heard from LSU defensive coordinator Blake Baker at the end of this past week, and he provided a little bit of clarity about exactly how he intends to use and where he intends to use LSU's greatest defensive weapon, Harold Perkins. We'll get into what Blake Baker had to say, but first, I got to let y'all know that today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. All right, let's get into it because a couple months ago, Brian Kelly shared in a sit-down with Wilson Alexander with Baton Rouge Advocate that they plan to move Harold Perkins back inside to play that inside linebacker position. We've seen that story before, and I did not like the ending very much. We saw Harold Perkins lining up an inside linebacker against Florida State, and he essentially was rendered useless. Like, Harold Perkins was not a factor in that game against Florida State. Now, after that game, I think that both he and Matt House, he meaning Brian Kelly, kind of threw their hands up and said, look, that's not working. We'll kind of move Harold Perkins around a little bit more. He played kind of like that middle linebacker position, a little bit more of a more of a versatile linebacker position, not quite where he was in his freshman season, just flying around on the edge, not a pure pass rusher, but a little bit more versatile than just playing on the inside. And overall, Harold Perkins didn't have a bad season. 74 tackles, 5.5 sacks, a slight notch down from his 7.5 from the year before. He had an interception, a very important and timely interception against Missouri. But overall, it wasn't the kind of season, so not a bad season, but overall not the kind of season that I expected Harold Perkins to have. Because I, and probably you and a lot of other LSU fans, were expecting Harold Perkins to build upon the absolute freak season that we saw him have in his freshman year, more specifically against Arkansas, which I still to this day affectionately call the Harold Perkins game, rightfully so. So you couldn't understand, and you probably felt the same way, my shock and confusion when Brian Kelly said, oh yeah, remember that thing that didn't work and it didn't work so poorly, so we just abandoned it after one game? Yeah, by the way, we're going to try that again. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it because my philosophy, and I think Brian Kelly's philosophy, and a lot of coaching philosophies are and should be, we're going to put our players in their best positions to succeed. Blake Baker talked about that in his press conference. We heard Joe Sloan talking about that offensively, that look, we're just going to put our playmakers in positions to succeed. We're just going to get the ball in the hands of our playmakers. Feels like a very simple concept, doesn't it? Like, hey, let's give the ball to our best players and let's put our best defensive players in the best positions to succeed. It feels very straightforward. It feels very obvious. So why are we putting, we meaning LSU, why is Brian Kelly and Blake Baker doubling down on what didn't work last season? Why put your best defensive player in a position where he has shown that he is less effective than in other positions? Blake Baker did at least provide a little bit more insight and clarification as to exactly how Harold Perkins is going to be used. That it's not just going to be a, hey, Harold, you're going to be on the inside and that's all you're going to do. This was Blake Baker on a more nuanced approach to how Harold Perkins is going to be used where he's going to play, and how he's much more than just one single position. This was Blake Baker.
Harold is a guy that we can use in a variety of different ways. So to me, we're not going to just put him in one spot and say, hey, this is what you're going to do. But now we have to start him there. Again, we got to start him there. He's got to get really good at the position. And then, again, his innate ability to come off the edge. He's a really good blitzer, as we're finding out this spring on the inside. He's really good in coverage. So there's not much the guy can't do. We just can't overload him with all that right now. But he's done a really good job learning the defense. He's done a really good job improving at inside linebacker. You know, that was one thing even when I told him in the recruiting process, you know, he didn't play inside linebacker in high school. He played running back. He played receiver. They put him at like a monster backer and kind of see ball, hit ball. So it's new to him, but he's really embraced the role. And again, we're going to find ways to utilize his skill set best and hopefully put him on their worst player every single week. So we have a lot of big plans for him, but we gotta crawl before we walk. So, but proud of him. He's done a really, really good job for us this far.
A couple of things there that stood out to me. Blake Baker clarified, look, we're not just going to put Harold in one position. We are going to put him on their worst player, and we're going to use him in a lot of different ways, in a variety of different ways. Yeah, we'll put him on the inside, but we'll also bring him out on the edge if we need to. We could also drop back in coverage. And I kind of assumed that would have been the case, but to hear Blake Baker, hearing it come from the horse's mouth, hearing him directly say it, that we're not just going to put a square peg into a round hole. We're not just going to continue to beat this dead horse of Harold Perkins only lining up on the inside, that we're going to use him in several different capacities, in several different positions whenever we see fit, because Harold Perkins is just a freak like that he can do so many different things, that he has such a specific and unique skill set, that he's quick, but he's strong, and he can get after the quarterback, but he can do it in such an elusive kind of way. So I am still firmly in the camp of just let Harold Perkins do what he does best. See ball, get ball. You heard Blake Baker say that. He's just a see ball, get ball kind of guy. That's what he does best. But I also understand the perspective of he's going to have to graduate from that. He's going to have to learn how to be multiple, because that's what's going to be asked of him at the next level. Now, I'm vehemently against prioritizing development for the next level over winning games, because that's your job. As a coach, your job is to win games. Your job is not to develop players for the NFL. Of course, that's a plus. Of course, whenever you have a long list of players that exceed and excel at the next level, that's a massive tally in your corner, and it's a great recruiting tool. But overall, your job is to win football games for the LSU Tigers. So where is Harold Perkins best to help you do that? It's probably in multiple different ways. What does that look like on every single Saturday? What does that look like on every single down? See, that's what I don't know. How does Blake Baker view when Harold Perkins works best in coverage, or when Harold Perkins works best coming off of the edge? Because if it was up to me, it'd just be coming off the edge every single down. But that's not how they want to use him. That's not how they intend to use him. But having the Swiss Army knife in Harold Perkins and having a defensive mind like Blake Baker, who has a proven track record of working with and developing linebackers and adding another layer to their game, I'm willing to trust it. I think that's also the feather in the cap that this coaching staff now has, at least on the defensive side of the ball, is, look, when you're new, you get that benefit of the doubt, that trust level, especially with this defensive coaching staff and the resumes that they come in with. But I'm still skeptical. I'm still nervous about it, and I still don't love it. So how exactly, because Blake Baker said, look, we're going to crawl before we walk. And I get it's April. You can crawl right now. We don't need to be walking. We don't need to be running. We don't need to be sprinting. Take it down to the nuts and bolts. Break it down. Crawl before you walk. I'm good with that. And I think that's very honest and transparent about where they are in this process with Harold Perkins. But how do you get from where we are now, crawling, to eventually sprinting, and Harold Perkins going back to being that defensive weapon that we know that he can be? How do we get there? We'll get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA, and we are almost there in the NHL. Plus, baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and so easy to use. So if you're looking in the NHL, because we're just a few days, just about a week or so removed from the Stanley Cup playoffs. So are you looking for an NHL bet to place before we get into the playoffs? I look at the Dallas Stars. That team is playing red freaking hot. They're a candidate to win the President's Trophy. And I think that they're going to want to finish this season out with a bang. So what are you waiting for? That's my take. Do it how you want to do it. Just do it with FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Do you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? You're not alone, trust me. So make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Blake Baker kind of clarified, look, we're going to have Harold Perkins doing a lot of different things, and I'm good with that. I want to, though, emphasize that I am very much so in the camp of who's your best player, where do they play best, where do they make the most impact for you, how do they help you win football games? Do that. Like, do that thing that helps you win football games. I'm not convinced that Harold Perkins playing inside linebacker helps you win football games more than Harold Perkins coming off the edge. But I'm willing to give it a shot. More so because there's a new coaching staff. Second of all, because I don't think that he's going to be placed in this position if it wasn't going to, one, benefit him, or two, benefit the team. But Blake Baker clarified, look, he's still learning. Inside linebacker is a hard position. I think it's an underratedly difficult position. You're the quarterback of the defense. You need to be seeing everything. So how do we get from this point? How do we go from Harold Perkins struggling at inside linebacker against Florida State to now that being an advantage for you? How do we go from Harold Perkins, where he is right now in his development, of taking that next step of being a little bit more of a refined, specific position, to being an asset for you at that position? How do we get there? Blake Baker provided a little bit of insight to that.
Reps. And so anytime I ever take over a new job, I'll have the GAs make like a 10, 20 play point of attack tape just to kind of see what a guy can do athletically when he's in position to make a play. Does he make it? So schematically, I really don't even know what they did last year. So I can't answer that from a schematic standpoint, but inside linebacker, to me, it's an instinctual position, but the way you gain instincts is by getting reps. So the more and more reps he gets, the more and more he continues to grow, and you've seen that so far. But that's really what it's going to come down to is making sure that we can maximize his reps, maximize him seeing different looks, and then playing off of that, and then simplifying the game for him. I think you go back to 21 with Damone Clark, same thing is everybody said, oh, he can't play inside linebacker. He can't. If you simplify the game for any kid, they can do what you ask them to do. And that's part of being a good coach, in my opinion, is asking a kid to do something that he can physically do and then demand he do it. If you ask a kid to do something he can't physically do, then you're a bad coach, you know what I mean, and demand him do it. So He'll be just fine. I'm excited about him.
And first of all, I like the acknowledgement. If you're demanding someone to do something that they, one, don't want to do, or two, can't do, you're a bad coach. That's true. You are. And that's the whole crux of my argument. Of good coaches put their best players in position, their players, period, in positions to succeed. Blake Baker acknowledges that. But reps is what he said. Reps is how we get there with Harold Perkins. So that's what makes this offseason so incredibly important. Where he's continuing to get reps, where he's continuing to get experience at this position. But with all of that being said, there's only really so much that you can simulate in practice. There's only so many, quote unquote, mock in-game reps you can get. There's only so much that you can learn before you actually hit the game field. And Harold Perkins isn't going to get very many opportunities for reps when you start the season with USC. I get USC's defense was pretty bad last year. But still, I still expect it to be a very high-powered offense. It's a Lincoln Riley offense. I think I expect USC to score points with or without Caleb Williams. So it was the same thing with Florida State last year. It was, okay, we're going to put you in the inside, and also you're going to be playing against Florida State. Surprise. You don't get, Nowheresville State University to be able to warm up and gain some of those in-game reps. Life comes at you fast. So that's a little bit of a concern, because it tells me that, look, the Harold Perkins at that position game 1 is not going to be the same Harold Perkins at that position as he is in game 5. And then game 10, and then ideally game 14 and 15, if the season allows them to get to 14 or 15 games. So it's going to take reps, and it's going to take time, and it might be a little bit ugly to start. So I am going to reserve at least a lot of judgment by understanding that Harold Perkins needs reps at this position, and understanding that there are certain reps and certain experiences that you simply just cannot recreate on the practice field, that you simply just cannot recreate in a spring game capacity. So I look a little rough, but I don't know how else you get there. I also think one thing of note, when Blake Baker mentions Damone Clark, of course, Damone Clark, he was a 4-star, 5-star recruit coming into LSU. His first 2 seasons, it left a little bit of meat on the bone, so to speak. Blake Baker comes in as the linebackers coach in 2021. His stats go from 63 tackles in 2020, and of course, it's a shortened season, so you have 2 fewer games, but still a massive leap. 63 total tackles in 2020, 136 in 2021. 1 sack in 2020, 5.5 in 2021. 2 forced fumbles. His first interception of his LSU career in that season. Damone Clark took a massive step forward under the tutelage of Blake Baker. I feel like Blake Baker mentioning Damone Clark is kind of his way of saying, trust me, I got this. I already did it. You already saw me do this once. I can do it again. Still don't know how much I love it, but I'm coming around to it. I can live with it. All right, coming up next, some transfer portal news. The first LSU Tiger to enter the transfer portal in the spring transfer portal window. What does it mean? Is it an indication of what could possibly be on the horizon? We'll get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. All right, I want to tell you about Game Time. So Game Time is actually, honestly, the very first place that I go when I look to buy tickets. I went to the Braves game this past week. It was Braves opening day, and it was an absolute blast. I was in Atlanta for a wedding, and I thought, I want to go to the Braves game, so let me check Game Time to find tickets. I found great prices on the tickets that I wanted, and it was such an easy price. It was such an easy process. So Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier, and I can personally attest to that. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So if you're a little bit of a procrastinator like I am, then hey, Game Time is the place for you. There's last minute deals as well. So you can save up to 60% off by buying last minute tickets for sports. And it's not just Major League Baseball. It's not just sports or games. It's also concerts, it's comedy events, it's theater events, plays, musicals, you name it. They've got it on the Game Time app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. A little bit of transfer portal news. This news dropped on Wednesday morning, I believe it was. Incoming sophomore edge rusher Jaxon Howard has entered the transfer portal. He is the first LSU Tiger to enter the transfer portal in the spring transfer portal window. So the portal doesn't officially open until April 16th, and it closes on April 30th, but you can at least announce your intentions to enter the portal. And then just a reminder, a refresher, that even if you haven't committed by April 30th, as long as you're in the transfer portal, you can commit anytime after that. So just a little bit of a refresher of transfer portal rules as we get into this transfer portal period. But Jaxon Howard, sophomore edge rusher, former 5-star recruit from Minneapolis. He was the number 1 recruit in the state of Minnesota in the 2023 class. And this was really, Brian Kelly's first official recruiting class, it felt like to me, where he had 1 year under his belt, where he had, a full year and a full offseason. He at least had the full year of experience, and we at least saw a year of, the Brian Kelly era. So that 2023 class, to me, that was a big deal. And I think it was a big deal to me and a lot of other people that class had so many great players from all across the country. For example, Jaxon Howard, the top player in the state of Minnesota. So I think that was a feather in Brian Kelly's cap whenever the class of 2023 was making their commitments. In terms of this upcoming season, this is not a concern for me with edge rusher, defensive end depth. Because frankly, I didn't see Jaxon Howard as being a foundational piece in this defensive end room for a couple of reasons. One, because Brian Kelly's made it pretty obvious that those that get the benefit of the doubt and those that get the first opportunity, it goes by seniority and it goes by players who have been in the building. So for example, CJ Daniels is not going to get an opportunity, at least in spring practice right now, over Chris Hilton, because CJ Daniels is new to the LSU program. Jaxon Howard, as just a sophomore, is not going to get an opportunity. And I believe he redshirted this past year. So yeah, this is his redshirt season. He's not going to get an opportunity over some other players that have more experience. And with that being said, that's the second reason why I'm not really that concerned in terms of depth about Jaxon Howard transferring, because you've got a Savion Jones, who I'm excited about. We'll talk about him. We'll get more into that on another upcoming edition of Locked On LSU. You've got Braden Swinson, Paris Shand, and Deshaun Womack that I think we all expect to take that next step forward. You have Ahmad Bro and Dylan Carpenter and Gabriel Relaford in that 2023 class as well. So not only do you have starters and starters that you feel fairly good about, but you also have some of those young guys that will continue to stay in the fold, assuming that they all stick around, don't enter the transfer portal in this upcoming portal or even in the fall transfer portal, but you have guys that you can build upon in the future. So I wish Jaxon Howard nothing but the absolute best moving forward. If I had to guess why he's transferring, I would venture to say he probably wanted more of a path to seeing the field, and he didn't see that at LSU. I don't see this being, some big, massive problem where there's going to be, the floodgates are opening and all of these defensive players are entering the transfer portal. I don't. I think it probably has something to do with new defensive coaching staff, a coaching staff that didn't recruit him to LSU. Maybe the system just didn't fit what he wants to do. Maybe he just wasn't happy after a full season in Baton Rouge. It's from Minnesota, for crying out loud. It's a little different. So I don't view this as being some sort of overarching concern. You always hate to see good players go, but it still leaves LSU in a pretty good position with this edge rusher defensive end room. There's going to be more players that enter the transfer portal. There's going to be. You're going to see names trickle in, and it might feel, a little anxious because it's never a fun feeling to see that a player wants to leave the program. So expect more names to come in. Who? I don't know. There are certain names that I hope don't enter the transfer portal, absolutely. But keep an eye on that over the next couple of days and remind yourself, the transfer portal taketh away, but it also giveth. And LSU is going to be needing some transfer portal giving at the running back position, at the D tackle position. So it's always a give and a take. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Coming up in tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU, we got a spring game. We got football coming up in Death Valley on Saturday, and there will be a who's who of 4s and 5 stars at Tiger Stadium on Saturday. So Brian Smith, Locked On's official recruiting insider, will join us to break all of that down. All of that coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.